I want the truth and nothing but the truth.
He can appear anywhere he wants, even thoughts. So he would have like non-physical existence at that point. But he is very much physical normally. Like he can be consistently have his head shut off. Like when Alucard has Schrodinger's powers, he still shot himself. So he's very much physical in that moment. So I don't think they're like passively having like no physical form. It's very much like something that basically Schrodinger or Alucard with that power would have to like choose to be as, like shown when like Schrodinger enters Zoran's. Well, basically he more so was in Saris's memories, which is how like encountered Zoran, but and he was physically there. So like, if he chooses to do that, obviously he would have no physical form. But normally he does have physical form when he's like present on Earth. Again, we've established he's not really omnipresent. He is stated to be everywhere and nowhere, but even like in the guidebook I mentioned before, there's a statement for Schrodinger, and I wanna read it like verbatim so I don't get anything wrong. I had my translator basically just go over it really quick. So here's the statement for Schrodinger. It says, "Living and dead at the same time, Schrodinger's cat's with two conflicting lives. As the name suggests, he is everywhere and nowhere, depending on his perception." So, it's very much, it depends on his perception to be there. He says, like, at one point, Tubalcain's blood let me know, like, where the meeting was. Later he says, like, when his powers are referenced, basically he says, like, he's either traveled or going to London, depending on the translation, right? But same difference. The Major, when explaining his power, says he jumps around the world. So, you could very much interpret it as more like a, not exactly teleportation. It's very much like where he perceives he will be, he's there. He travels there. But he's not like everywhere and like in existence at the same time. I've also somehow seen people say that he somehow is like outside of space and time, and that would give like Alucard like immeasurable speed, when that's inherently contradicted by him being tagged by Integra's bullet. I mean, Schrodinger himself is consistently tagged by bullets. He's definitely not outside of space and time. That's never been stated. It's just basically like vague extrapolation on what very little knowledge we have available on Schrodinger's powers. All Schrodinger would literally just give Alucard is the ability to remanifest himself every time Dio kills him, right? And what we like to call in the Versus community, low godly regen, because Alucard was able to regenerate just from his soul after he killed off all the other souls and had lost his body from like being exposed to Schrodinger in the first place. The other thing is that like Schrodinger doesn't mix well with his normal power set. Like he still can probably use like his normal level of regeneration he showed in level 0. Like he's not going to be able to have any familiars or like summon his zombie army, because like even more than one soul within him besides like Schrodinger and himself would cause him to not be able to perceive himself or give difficulty to perceiving himself. So that's pretty much why Death Battle didn't really include it. It's impossible to combine both power sets. Even under the composite rule of Death Battle, it just literally cannot be done. You end up with a version of Alucard that literally would just cease to exist. And giving him his Schrodinger powers kind of doesn't make for a entertaining fight at all. You just have Dio repeatedly killing him just remanifesting himself. And then it comes down to a debate on whether or not, like, Dio can hypnotize him. I don't think, like, the flesh buds could truly control him, since, like, his body is more so like a shadowy mass. I mean, you could argue he still has a brain because he has a heart, but the heart is treated as more like a special thing for him, where the heart always exists, and is the ultimate thing that results in his death when he's in level 0 if you can destroy it properly. Like, he can regenerate his head in level 0 as shown when, like, Anderson destroys it. But he cannot regenerate his heart if it's destroyed. level 0. So yeah, but hypnosis is contentious. We know that like basically like the memories from like Ceres once she acquires like becomes like a full vampire. The other memories are like capable of protecting her from Zoran's illusion abilities, like which basically use her own memories. But you could also argue that like illusions and hypnosis are kind of different. Um, it's kind of debatable. You could also argue that like the third eye can like perceive like past illusions, though. Then this brings up like the contention of whether or not like Tubal Cain created like a card doppelganger or used like an illusion on Alucard. Um, and Alucard did get like caught off guard by that. It is very much possible he could resist hypnosis, but it's not like 100% provable. He himself does have hypnosis, and Dio doesn't inherently have a counter per se. But Dio, the problem again is like as we established earlier, the stats. Dio is so much faster, even in short like in short range, which is what's going to be relevant when like using the world for combat. He's just way too fast to be caught on that. And the other thing would be I've seen contention with people saying that Dio shouldn't have his part 1 powers. He does show like part 1 powers in part 3, that being like sucking up blood via his like fingers. But like the novel Over Heaven, which is like secondary canon, says that like the reason he doesn't use powers in part 3 is that Jonathan's body is rejecting him, making it somewhat difficult, and he didn't consider it suitable for stand combat. Neither of which would really apply to like Alucard. Death Battle would be using like peak Dio, which is high Dio, like when Jonathan's body is no longer rejecting him, and he'd probably find out pretty quick that Alucard doesn't have stand, since I mean he wouldn't be seeing a stand, just the familiars which are not stands. Alucard himself being able to see a stand is contentious. Like, you could maybe make the argument with the third eye. He could see some, like, supernatural force, or at least, like, maybe sense it. Like, I don't think he'd properly be able to see it. It'd be kind of like a Bleach situation in this. It'd be difficult to objectively prove he can see it. Even if he could see it, and then it becomes even bigger contention whether or not he can physically interact with it, given, like, the intangibility aspect. You could argue that, like, Alucard himself can turn intangible, but that doesn't inherently prove he can interact, as he's never used his intangibility in combat. In fact, he's only ever used his, like, telekinesis arguably once in combat, and it's not objectively proven it was TK. It's when he throws Brazilian, like, soldiers out of the building he was in, like, they get chucked through the window and end up on the poles, like Vlad Impaler style. Which is kind of weird if he, like, physically threw them. But again, like, we don't, like, see him enact TK on them. It's kind of, like, off-screen. It could be, since we know that he can use it on the boat to move it. That's pretty much everything I wanted to cover, pretty much. Like, in the end, Dio physically scales to Tarkus at his peak, which already puts him above, like, what you can consistently get Alucard himself to physically. The world really scales above Alucard to an obnoxious degree. The only way you can save Alucard there is basically arguing he's, like, gets, like, the city block durability from the plane crash, and if you do that, the world just ends up, like, far higher into that tier that it almost one-shots with, like, planet wave scaling if you, like, use 3 minutes. It'd be, like, a 10 to 100 difference, which is, well, you can already see the problem there. And then the speed and, like, short contact is going to be, ends up with Dio being faster. Even if you argue Dio is, like, cannot use any of the FTL stuff, there's, like, hypersonic stuff with, like, explosion reactions, and, I believe it was part 1. And there's also, like, bullet timing and other parts for, like, part 6 as well. If it does come down to bullet timing, you could argue that, like, bullet timing in Hellsing is more, like, impressive on screen than, like, bullet timing in JoJo. I think the FTL stuff, or at least, like, relativistic, is consistent enough that it would end up being like the demise of Alucard speed wise. If you take into account the statement I mentioned earlier from the guidebook, there is a chance that the fight just keeps going, and Alucard maybe gets lucky with hypnosis. And at that rate, I mean, he could potentially then use like the hypnosis maybe to order Dio to kill himself or something. But that's really the only way I see Alucard winning. He's only ever used hypnosis in combat once, which was on like guards, and only to order one to keep an elevator open. That one gets thrown out of the elevator and then is like panicking as Alucard kills him, seemingly that like the hypnosis has worn off. Perhaps because the order that Alucard had given was done. But yeah, that's the only really like usage of it in combat. I don't see Alucard defaulting to it. And to be fair, I don't see Dio like defaulting to something like hypnosis or like flesh buds, unless like he notices he just cannot kill Alucard repeatedly on end. The one more thing I will mention: time stop does get progressively longer for Dio every time he uses it, especially at like high Dio where Jonathan's body is no longer rejecting him. So that's also going to be a problem for Alucard. Like the honest question: can Dio kill Alucard 3 million times? Probably. He would just like feast upon Alucard's own blood. Like, I've seen people argue, oh, if Dio does that, it's game over. But like, Alucard's blood being consumed by others has never like wrecked them inside or something. There's no basis for that. Heck, Ceres was going to drink Alucard's blood, and all it was going to do was like upgrade her to being a true vampire. And while like JoJo vampires and Hellsing vampires are somewhat different, Dio is a vampire, and I don't really see like any proof that consuming Alucard's blood would like cause him any issues. I've seen people argue that Alucard consuming Dio's blood would give him like a stand, but that's kind of contentious. First of all, like, just consuming some of Dio's blood probably wouldn't kill him. You'd have to consume the entirety in order to get the soul, and then it's like debatable if whether or not he would even get the world. If he did, at that point Dio's already dead. If all of his blood has been if soul has been stolen, so it's kind of pointless. But yeah, that covers most of the stuff. There is like an ongoing debate. The explosion of the boat in part 1. You could argue that like later on Araki might have forgotten to some degree. I don't really care too much about that one, since it's a contentious feat. But like, if you combine it with everything else, it just means further problems for Alucard being able to harm Dio. If you come down to like the piercing durability thing, that like JoJo has bad piercing durability, I could very much see that like the guns being a problem, but Dio would probably pick up on that pretty quick and move in to destroy them like at close combat. Like, nothing stopping the world from like stopping time while the guns are out, grabbing the guns and crushing them. Like, we know that the guns cannot be respawned. The moment that Walter had the Jackal blown up, like basically he couldn't respawn the Jackal. The guns get destroyed, they're gone, and there goes most of Alucard's like piercing abilities. Like, you'd have to argue that he goes level 0 to bring out like Rip Van Winkle or Tubal Cain. And the problem is Tubal Cain's cards are too slow, and so is like Rip Van Winkle's like Mach 33 bullet, or like the bullet. And if you say it's like Mach 1500, still too slow. Like, the cards have some like regen negation properties, but like they've only like shown small cuts on Alucard that he wasn't able to heal, and the moment he went level 0 he was able to heal them. Probably like high Dio would have sufficient regen where that's not a problem. I'm trying to think if there's anything else you could argue that Alucard could bring to the table that ensures like a victory for him. He could possibly create illusions, but the thing is, Alucard doesn't like using illusions. Like, the only time he's ever used illusions was life or death. Literally, when he was down to no lives, grievously injured, and Walter was about to go and destroy his heart. That is literally the only time he has ever used like illusions. If he does use illusions, it could help him to a degree, but then again, like he doesn't have the AP to win. You could argue that like if Baskerville swallows Dio whole, it could seal him like it did Luke Valentine, but there's really nothing stopping the world from like ripping like it apart like, as it tries to swallow Dio. Like it has stronger strength than Baskerville. Baskerville got one-shotted by a building level attack, so there's nothing stopping the world from one-shotting it. After Baskerville died, it wasn't able to be brought back as well by Alucard, so it dying once means checkmate on Baskerville. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. You could argue if there's like a gigantic army present from level 0, it would be a problem for Dio. Especially if there's like a lot of piercing weapons around the area, but like nothing's stopping Dio from like jumping in the air. Like even in the manga, he seems to like be able to like jump in the air and move without like having to use a surface, almost like pseudo flight. Like he literally could just moving forward and cross over the entire army to get to where Alucard is. And I mean, he doesn't know that Alucard's weakness is the heart, but like, have you seen him kill Kakyoin? There's nothing stopping him from in character just wanting to punch someone through the chest. He does that on level 0 Alucard, and Alucard is dead. And we know that like from Walter killing Alucard like once after he started absorbing new souls, and Alucard said that you have thousands more to go, that like you don't have to destroy the heart to take away one life, like one soul on like level 1 or before, just like have to wound him in such a degree that it results in like him having to use a soul. So I could totally see the world just like ripping him apart continuously and forcing him to keep using souls. Level 0 also gives like Dio a bunch of blood to absorb. It's like the familiars have blood is going to keep him going, so it's kind of a lost situation there. There's and since he has the part 1 powers, if like especially under like death battle standards where we're including like anime feats, cloud split also being like in the city block territory and the amount of range it could cover, like from his eye beams, are going to be able to clear a large portion of the army, especially if he keeps using it. Which he should be able to. And yeah, that pretty much covers everything I wanted to go over. I do think, like I said, there are situations where Alucard could win. If he's restricted to not being able to use level 0, and Dio just has to keep going and going, a combination of maybe illusions or hypnosis could seal the deal. But at the same time, nothing is stopping Dio from also just keep going, replenishing himself. I've seen people argue that Alucard keeps him going until the sun comes out. Nothing stops Dio from pulling what Jotaro did with the sun, just like punching the ground to be in an area without like sunlight. This also assumes that the sky is going to be perfectly like not cloudy, like with just the sun going, or that like Dio notices that it's getting closer and closer to morning and just decides to bail. Go in an area that there isn't sunlight, like shaded. You have to just make a lot of assumptions that like the sunlight would be what does Dio in. Like Alucard can win. It's just not as likely. If he was closer in stats, or if they were like dead even in stats, I would absolutely favor Alucard, even with the speed advantage. Like, I'm just talking about AP. Even if like the speed difference was as big as we're currently at, that's what I would say. Anyways, thank you for staying with me this long, and thank you for having me on. I just wanted to like correct a lot of the like mistakes that a lot of the community are making on. And to be fair, the death battle did kind of like have. I mean, you could argue that like again, Dio was highballed to a large degree, so I don't blame a lot of people on that. It's just like the Alucard is a very lovable character. He is. He's a very fun character. Hellsing's great, both adaptations. But you end up with in a situation where Dio is from a series that Araki put in a lot of workroom with like higher end feats that Hellsing does, and it's consistent enough, and even the Lightspeed stuff is consistent enough. Like, if we were to try and push and give, like, I don't know, say that, like, Set causing a lot of explosions, throughout London and the like, OG anime somehow gets higher than anything you could give Dio, which, contentiously, it doesn't. The funny thing is, there was going to be a Phantom Blood movie that was never properly released, right? But footage was gotten for it, and if you're fine giving something not, like, super non-canon as, like, the, like, original anime, you have, like, in the OVA, like, just base Dio being able to throw a boat or, like, wrecking a building with his own punches, not even the world, and then, like, Phantom Blood has freaking, Will Zeppeli, like, create this giant shockwave with a handshake with Haman, with his master, and it was calculated like 202 kilotons of TNT. This is like not even a highballed version of this. Is a lowballed version. That feat is crazy. If you ever like, there's like footage of it on YouTube of like attempt to recreate the film. Go in and watch until you get to the Will Zeppeli feat, like with shaking his master. That scene is just ballers. It's crazy. It's like way above anything you could ever argue for Hellsing, period. If you want to go the non-canon route. Yeah, that's everything I had to say. Thank you for having me on, and thank you for listening. And please go support both series officially, whether it be manga, anime. Purchase them in a way that you're contributing to both franchises, because they're just, to be honest, completely amazing. Thank you.